Hi, I'm Patrick Deere. I teach in the English department at NYU,
I'm Daniel Fish.
and we're absolutely honoured and excited to have Daniel here to talk about his recent production of White Noise, freely adapted from Don DeLillo's classic postmodern novel. Of the mid-80s that was performed here at NYU Skirball Theatre in September of this year, 2019. And I guess an initial thought that I'd had, having been really enormously impressed and excited by your adaptation of White Noise, would be a sort of fairly straightforward question, potentially. I know that you had developed the adaptation of White Noise back in Germany. Why did you decide upon White Noise in particular? Was there something that was really...
I've always loved the novel. I read the novel as a young man in the 80s, probably in 1987.
Yeah.
And I think for me and for a lot of people in my generation, it was a very important book. And I had always sort of had a kind of idea, well, not an idea, a desire to work on it as a stage piece. And over the years, I inquired about the rights a number of times, and they weren't available. And I was talking to a theater in Germany, Theater Freiburg, and they asked me to make a production there. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go do something in Germany, I should do something that I can't do anywhere else. And so I kind of, on a bit of a lark, said, hey, how about Don DeLillo's White Noise, not ever thinking they would obtain the rights, which they did. And then I went back and read it for the first time, and probably it was the third time reading the novel, but
Yeah.
probably the first time I had read it in probably 15 years or so. And I found a very different novel than the novel that I remembered. And I also found a novel that I thought was completely impossible to adapt for the stage. So, left with that, I showed up in Germany with Jim Finley, the video designer, Bruce Mackenzie, the actor, Dowie Luty, the costume designer, Andrew Lieberman, the set designer, and Alex Cathell, my associate, and the book. And we did not enter rehearsal with an adaptation. And I don't even think I wouldn't use the word adaptation for what we did, but I understand why people did it. It's a meditation on the novel, or a conversation with the novel, but it's certainly not an adaptation, a straight adaptation of the
Right.
book. I had a kind of a, I guess for want of a better word, obsession with the book. It made an impact on me when I was young, and that's why.
And just for people who, are less familiar with the book, and I think both of us would strongly agree that you should go off and read it if you haven't read it yet. And I want to come back to this question of impossibility. So this is a novel, it's a campus novel set, I guess, in the early 80s in a New England college.
Mm-hmm.
The protagonist is Jack Gladney, or as he creates a professional persona, J.A.K. Gladney, is advised to wear dark glasses as part of his professional persona, and he's an expert in Hitler studies and corners the market in a certain sense, and in many ways it is a kind of darkly ironic but also very moving novel, and I think that's something you engage with very strongly in your production. And then various strangely DeLillo-esque things happen, including an airborne toxic event, an ecological catastrophe that I guess there's a train derails, there's a chemical fire,
Yes.
a state quite prescient in terms of environmental, apocalyptic imaginary. He discovers that his wife has been having an affair. He has a household of a variegated household of different children from different marriages. One toddler manages to walk across an expressway and back and survive. And it's a pretty remarkable text. Did you? So when were you the and it kind of speaks to the present in all sorts of different ways. So when you say you thought it was impossible, but you were going to do it anyway, can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah,
impulse?
I mean, I think that's always a good sign.
Yes.
You know? I mean, if I know how to do something, there's no point in doing it. I mean, what I think this was particularly challenging because when I pitched the idea, I really didn't have any clue, and I thought that, and my memory of the novel was very different than I discovered it to be, and so I had to kind of confront that in myself, and the book meaning something different to me as a middle-aged man as it did to a young man. So it was a lot about that. But the novel is extraordinarily prescient, and I have the sense that it's written at the edge of an era. It's written just before not just before the internet, but I guess essentially really is just before the internet. And you sort of, I don't know, you just sort of feel this sense of an era ending and another beginning in the novel, and that was something that interested me.
Did you and that was something that interested you in terms of your
it's
that
something that kept me going.
Yeah.
It was like a source of curiosity.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, it's like that was, whenever I would be like, oh, why the hell am I doing this? This is impossible.
Yeah.
Like, let it be the book. The book is
Right.
great. Why touch this thing?
Yeah.
That would sort of give me a little bit of fuel, to do it. And then the process was one in which I had a copy of the book, had a couple copies.
Yeah.
I had two highlighters, an orange one and a blue one. And in one color, I just highlighted everything that I thought was a list. And I had a kind of rule, what determined a list for me. I think it had to be more than 3 things.
Yeah.
And that was sort of it. So I highlighted everything that was a list, and then I highlighted in a different color just the stuff that spoke to me, just that, hit me in some way. And that's what I went to Germany with. And we tried a lot of different things, and we were working with these teenagers and these preteens on video a couple times a week. So that was also a choice that we would make, that the children would have. The children felt like an important part of the story.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so we just made a formal decision to do something with them. And over the course of about 6 or 7 weeks in Freiburg, we made it.
Did you, so there's a couple of different things I wanted to ask you about there, but just this brilliant strategy, I mean, in a way it's astonishing for readers of the novel, especially if you've read it a few times as I have. The core of the production of the show is Bruce Mackenzie performing lists, more, with breaks, but more or less continuously. It's a remarkable and often quite visceral experience. Did you? So initially you had the different highlighters. You had the notion of pulling out lists, a kind of inventorying, which is definitely part of the novel. There were other parts. Were those things that spoke to you, were they more narrative? And was there a moment when you thought, okay, that we're going to go with the lists as the...
Yeah, there was a moment we were throwing paint at the wall for about 3 weeks, and I finally just said, we're going to do this.
Right.
And said to Bruce, you're going to have to learn all of this. Well, and that was, if I'm being honest, probably more of a conversation. Bruce decided that rather than use an in-ear monitor or a teleprompter, he wanted to learn it all. And that, I think, ends up being a real strength and poignancy of the performance.
Absolutely.
That he's
yeah.
not getting it from anywhere but his own memory.
Because you have done that technique of
Yeah, and
using
a lot of people
yeah.
have done that technique,
Yeah.
and and there was a brief moment where we thought Bruce might not be able to do the show here, and we thought, oh, maybe we could have somebody else do it with an in-ear, and in about 30 seconds of trying that, I realized, oh, no way, that's not what we've made.
Yeah.
And there's something about, as long as he's speaking, he's alive. And I one of the things that's always struck me about the book is the last line, and I've never asked DeLillo this. I kind of wouldn't want to ask him it, but the last line of the book harks back to the last line of James Joyce's The Dead.
Right.
And it's the same rhythm as the last line of The Dead.
Yeah. Would you?
Yeah, absolutely. The tales of the supernatural and the extraterrestrial, the miracle vitamins, the cures for cancer, the remedies for obesity, the cults of the famous and the dead. And Joyce's is, you probably know it, but it's upon all this, the church where Michael Fury lay buried. What is it?
And it's about the snow coming down.
Upon all the living and the dead.
Exactly.
It's upon the snow was falling upon all the living and the dead, and it's the exact same rhythm. So that always, it's kind of haunted me about.
Yeah, which and it is a sort of stunning close, especially. So you haven't asked DeLillo whether.
No, and I wouldn't want to know. I mean, honestly, like like that's my little thing, and like I wouldn't ask him that. I don't think he would tell me.
Probably not, and it better that way, I guess. So, and in terms of the in terms of the process, did you, when you were working together in Germany, so you seized upon this sort of memorialization, which is, it's just a remarkable achievement because there's a very powerful associative logic to the lists, and there's a way in which when you're sitting in the audience, the rest of the fabric of the novel is kind of hovering around, and you're. But in mentioning narrative, there are there is a certain kind of narrative to the show as well. Did you in making the choice about the set design, this tremendously haunting. It appears like it's almost like an eclipse, a disc, and then it's a tunnel, and then Bruce Mackenzie is sitting in it, and sometimes moves back and forth. I was at what point were you thinking about the interaction of the set and the video projections? Was that a kind of progressive part of your process?
Yeah, I think we made some decisions early on about what the set would be.
Yeah.
And we were essentially rehearsing with the set and with video the whole time, which is much more common in Germany than it is here. The piece couldn't have been made, I think, any other way. So the process was one where our days were mostly divided, so half the day would be working with Bruce on the text, and in those moments he might be sitting in the tunnel, but he might just be sitting down. And then the other half of the day was working with the kids and filming these sequences with the kids. And then at a certain point, we started putting all those together.
Yeah, and the effect is remarkable. One more thing about the list. So if I'm right, before there's a really wonderful couple of video extracts of the show on the Skirball website, which I strongly recommend people to have a look at. So before I went to the show, I watched those, and I sat with my novel. No, and I inductively, I was just trying to figure out that there's something, I guess this is a way of asking, if you had a sense of, to what degree are you challenging, you know, the audience to make some kind of interaction between, if they have an experience of the novel, of the novelistic narrative and the show, it's quite difficult to articulate just how remarkable this sensation is of having. There is something cooperative in listening to Bruce do the memorized lists, and then it's acting on your own memory of the text. Do the lists go? This is a simple-minded question. Are the lists going in sequence? Yes,
absolutely
right.
Chronological.
Which was But
your question is, am I challenging the audience to make to relate it to their experience of the book?
Yeah, I guess how important is that?
I don't think it's. I mean, I think it's up to the individual.
Right.
Either you have, maybe you have a history with the book, maybe you don't. I don't think it's essential to the viewing of the show. And I can only speak for myself. I mean, for me, there is a kind of. I was thinking about the events in the book as I was making it, but I wasn't being at all slavish to them.
No.
So we were kind of improvising on them, if you will. And in a way that I think was interesting or compelling to us, and by us I mean myself and Jim Finley, the video designer, and Bruce, as well as Joey and Andrew, and just kind of going with that.
Right. Yeah.
And really also reacting to what's in front of us. I mean, those kids were so wonderful.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about working with them.
They were extraordinary, and they were very game.
Yeah.
And the thing about, I mean, there's a line in the book that, fuck me, it's something like, there are no amateurs in the world of children. I believe that's
right.
I believe that's the
right.
quote. Which is so right. And it's like they can't lie. And so a lot of what we did was just reacting to what would happen if we put the camera on their faces. What would happen if we put the camera on their face and we dripped blood on them?
Yeah.
What would happen if they were lying down and we poured blood on them? What would happen if we put them all in a supermarket, which did not end up in the piece, but there was a long sequence shot in a German supermarket.
Right.
As there was a long sequence shot with them all dressed as nuns rollerblading around stage, which also didn't end up in the piece. But I'm always struck by that you really can't pull the wool over a child's eye in that way. And also what was interesting, the kids ranged from, I think probably the youngest was maybe 8 or 9, and the oldest was 17. So within that, there was a whole range of people's, awareness, self-consciousness, awareness of their bodies, awareness of their sexuality, that would shift all the time. In a way that at times felt a little bit, we were pushing a line, I think. And that felt interesting. But also but I think that's really just about asking an audience to look at something for a long period of time, or for maybe a little bit longer than they might normally look at it, and not explain it, and allow them to project their own meaning onto it.
And I think that works brilliantly well, because I mean, one thing you mentioned, in Jack Finley's, I mean, they're both beautiful and at times terrifying, the video back projections, but the appearance of blood and the children suddenly, and teenagers, suddenly they're bruised or damaged, and this is deeply unsettling. But then at a certain point you're showing them having makeup, I guess, somewhat not prosthetic. I'm not sure what the
you're seeing the blood applied.
Seeing the blood applied. So that in itself is sort of fascinating. I suppose counterintuitive in a way that the prosthetic wounding, or the simulation would be a postmodern term, that's usually hidden, behind the...
But that's also something from the novel. I mean, there's a scene in the novel where they're preparing for a disaster.
Yes.
And as part of the disaster, everybody plays a role.
Right.
So this is where that came from.
Yeah. So it was it's DeLillo's kind of darkly ironic Our Town take on the fact that they use everyone in this small college town is supposed to play a role in the disaster preparedness simulation. Do you think you talked about, so you felt it in Germany, you were at times pushing a line in terms of, because I'm wondering if, how the line shifts a little bit with the US.
Let me just say, look, the environment was always totally safe.
Yeah, of course.
But I just think being in a room with children, there's a vulnerability there. And I think, when we were at our best, we were open. That was in the room.
Yeah.
And there are ways in which, certain of I say children, they're not children, they're young adults, and some of them were very aware of being looked at by the camera and could perform for the camera. Others were more naive, and we really didn't direct them beyond sit here and just be present, and probably the language barrier helped that. I'm not sure what your question.
Well, it was, I guess, in a way, I'm asking about. There's a way in which the sort of iconography, the imaginary around childhood, is at once sort of international, transnational, but also very culturally specific. And I'm wondering if you felt, in bringing the show to the US, to New York, if you're able to play upon other kinds of associations, because I guess well, so for instance, I'm just thinking about I don't know if this was just me, but the very highly charged kind of media imaginary around school shootings that
this was certainly in our minds while we were making it. I don't think that's. I think in the audiences in Germany were aware of that. I think it's one of the things they think about America right now. It's one of the ways they define us, particularly in relation to children. They think about this. So that was on our minds.
Yeah, and in fact, again, this is something where there's a scene in White Noise where Jack Gladney's son kind of he worries about his son Heinrich. Will he end up holed up in a motel? But there the fear is that a SWAT team might come and shoot him. Now, alas, we're in a situation where someone of Heinrich's age could get access to weapons. The tables are turned, but there's a way in which that's part of DeLillo's apocalyptic imaginary, but it's still... I don't know if you feel like there's some distance travelled there between... You talked about being at the edge of one age and era and another, in the sense that DeLillo's very highly invested in the figure of the lone gunman, and now, there's just the fear of more collective forms of violence. What's your attitude to incorporating those violent elements in the... Would you describe them as violent elements?
Well, I describe
just the wounds on the children's faces, I
would describe them as what they are. I would describe them as blood, as blood applied to a child's face.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, so, yeah.
That's fascinating.
I mean, you know, I step back from saying
Okay.
it's a scene of violence.
Yeah.
No, it's blood being applied to, it's fake blood being applied to a child's face. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, what you associate from that
Right.
is up to you. And
Yeah.
what we do is try to light it and make it happen in a way that feels compelling to us, or
Yeah.
that moves us. And that if we do that, then it doesn't, and we do it well, it doesn't belong to us anymore. It belongs to the viewer.
Yeah.
You know, so when someone says, you know, what's your, you're sniffing a little bit around, like, what's your intention? I feel like maybe, but
Yeah, no, I think you're right, quite right to call me on that, because it's that there's something so complex going on in the show that it feels like a crude simplification to approach it in that way. But that notion of just saying, actually, what we're doing is applying blood to a
yeah,
unit.
and I watch it, and
Yeah.
at times I think, and then at times I think, well, we're killing our children. So I have both of those
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah,
You know, and we're killing the children in us.
right.
We're killing the child in us.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I really,
but I should say that that's not something that precedes the work. That's the result of the work.
Oh, that's
So
from doing the work.
I go, oh,
yeah.
that's what I see.
Okay.
I don't think
Yeah.
I'm going to make a piece about us murdering our children
No.
and therefore do X, Y,
Yeah.
therefore
Yeah.
get a bunch of kids and
Yeah.
put blood on them.
Yeah,
There are people who work that way,
right.
and it's valid.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's
Yeah.
not. For me, it's more. You do something and trust that it's coming from some place
Yeah,
of authenticity, and you know, and if it ends up in the final version, it's there probably because we've, you know, honed it and refined it,
Yeah.
and eliminated a lot of other things around it.
right. And could you just say a bit more of that, because it's a very striking statement. We're killing our children. We're killing, you know, the children within us. Do you think that is, in terms of the sort of literal translation, movement in time and space from Germany to the US, you know, where you've ended up with this, do you think that is something specific to our culture, you know, compared to the point of origin? I mean, having developed, got things started in Germany, were you, or another way of asking this was, were you consciously setting about, you know, responding to DeLillo's sort of classic American novel? Was this consciously a reflection on the US, or?
Well, how can it not be?
Yeah.
I'm an American Jew going to Germany, making a piece of theater, so I was very aware of that,
Yeah.
and I was like, I should let that be part of it.
Right.
But how could it not be part
Yeah,
of it?
of course.
But beyond, I'm not sure there was much beyond
Yeah.
the knowledge of it.
Yeah. And do you, in thinking about the relationship between you're working with the children, which I agree is done with remarkable, you know, tenderness and care, the way they inhabit the space on the stage, and then here you have this older man, Bruce Mackenzie, memorizing and performing the lists. Do you see that as being all of a piece, or do you think there's a kind of generational counterpoint in terms of the way is he coming from a different time, or is it all the same time of the show? I mean, in relation to, again, going back to, here's a novel from the 80s.
I mean, I guess I would
Yeah.
describe it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
That the show is it's what happens when I put Bruce,
Yeah.
an extended excerpt of DeLillo's text,
Yeah.
video of these children from
Yeah.
Freiburg, Germany,
Yeah.
a live score by Bobby Previtt,
Right.
all in a room together, and they coexist together.
Yeah.
What happens?
What happens? Yeah.
You know, and maybe that's interesting, maybe it's not. But all of those elements are in the room together on that
Yeah.
night. So I don't
Yeah.
think anyone's, like from a different time or
Right.
something like that.
Right.
The words are being said now. The
Yeah.
words were written in '85, but
Yeah.
they're being said now. So for me, it's very immediate.
Yeah. And in terms of, do you think that just creating this remarkable sort of immediacy, the coexisting of these elements, was it to what degree do you think the experience of working in Germany in a different kind of theatrical setup, in a different kind of I guess a country where there's quite a lot more state support of the theatres, there's a repertory system. Do you think being in that kind of setting, did it foster some of the?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I can't believe what they let us get away with. They basically left us alone
Yeah.
for 6 weeks. I don't think they had any idea what we were doing in that room. So I don't know that would have happened here.
Yeah.
This piece never would have been made here on the level
Right.
that it was made there. I could have made it at the Chocolate Factory at a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
But I think, I can't imagine, and they had some resistance to it at first too, when I said, they were like, where's the adaptation? I'm like, there isn't an adaptation, I'm coming in with the book. I doubt that would happen here.
Right.
Unless it was self-produced.
Yeah.
So.
And but there's still perhaps the same impulse all over the world. Where's the adaptation?
Yeah, and I think, if I may be projecting a little bit here, but I think one of the things that's happening is that they're becoming a little bit more like us. They're becoming a little bit more market-driven. They're becoming a little more concerned about the audience.
Right.
But they've still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Every time I feel it there, I go, oh my God, it's happening here, and then I come back here and I go, oh my God, it's so much worse. So the fact that they made this show, that they did it in a festival in Beckley's house in Germany, and they brought it back the following year to do it in Freiburg,
right?
And that the audience would come and see it, and then they just did it. They did those week of performances, and that was it. It's done. And that's fine.
Yeah.
And they threw a lot of resources and money at all of that to make that happen, and there wasn't going to be any return on it.
Yeah.
Beyond the week of performances that we did. That's kind of unheard of here.
It is pretty remarkable, and as you say, the scale of the show White Noise at Skirball, it was just really impressive, beautiful, moving. I was wondering. Collaborating in a particular time and space, moving a show, developing it, bringing it, to New York. Now, because I know with Oklahoma, again, there was a trajectory of developing it and then doing it St. Anne's and then coming to Broadway. Now, this may sound like a simple-minded question from someone who's not in the theatre world. I'm a literature professor, but to what degree, how does that sort of affect your process? And are you just perforce adapting to material circumstances when you're, moving.
How does what affect my process?
Well, just having working on a show, collaborating, you know, in a different time and place, moving the show and again. Do you feel like that's become part of your creative process? Is that sort of
not? I mean,
yeah.
Hopefully I get a chance to make it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Which I do think.
Yeah.
I think there's no question the show was better, infinitely better
Right.
here at Skirball than it was in Germany. Partly because of Bobby's score that was added, partly because Bruce had the time to integrate it more.
Yeah.
And partly because it was an American audience that wasn't struggling with the language the way a German audience was. But yeah, anytime you get to do something, again, I think it's hopefully it's another chance to be, more truthful with it, and more authentic with it.
When you were working with Bruce, when he was able to do the show, hooray, thank goodness, that return to the memorialization of the lists, do you think that's in a sense, rather than sort of coming up with the lists, pulling them out of the novel, creating them originally for the Freiburg production, is that, and when you're working with him for this production, is that did that sort of orient things slightly differently in terms of, it's hard for me to imagine the kind of, just the sheer effort of memorialization.
Was it different here than there?
Yeah.
I mean, we had very little time here. So,
Yeah.
basically we got into a room, we did a couple of run-throughs, added Bobby's score, made some notes on Bobby's score, and we did it. And in the meantime, Bruce was walking around the city, going over the text in his head every day, which is what he did to learn it. So that was essentially, the process.
Yeah. Do you think, were you also trying to say something about the status of, or not you, but is the show also in challenge, you said that in a certain sense you're putting these elements together, now it belongs to the audience, it's our responsibility to, in a certain sense, to respond. Do you think, is there something, I guess the theme of historical memory and historical justice is definitely there in White Noise. Do you think the show is also challenging us to reorient our own attitudes towards memory or memorialization? I mean, just seeing an actor do this.
I mean, I hadn't thought of it that way, but yes, I mean, that's a great response.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you use this word memorialization. Not, you don't say memorization. You say memorialization,
right.
Which is there's something about him calling up something from the dead.
Yeah.
Like calling up these words from the dead.
Right.
There's a lot of death in the book.
Yeah, there is.
And the first time I read it, that was not coming at me as strong as the second, when I read it more recently. I thought the book was much funnier when I first read it.
Absolutely.
I thought it was a lot about family and media and the sort of breakdown of the family and the kind of satirization of media in domestic life. And when I read it again, knowing I was going to work on it, for me, it was much more about the fear of dying.
Yeah.
And an obsession with death.
Yeah. It's quite striking when you say that, because memorialization, it also has the sense of kind of creating a monument in a certain way, and there's also this poignancy to the juxtaposition of the children who, or the young adults who are inhabiting, I guess, their own sort of present, which is where kids live. But the counterpoint between their temporality and, you know, the listing, it's tremendously moving, you know, and I guess in a certain sense, yeah, there. I mean, there's something. Do you think there's something sort of monumental in there as well, in the sense
Monumental in the sense of a monument, or
Yeah.
monumental in terms of scale?
Well, both.
No, you know, there's something about, you know, it begins with boxes of books,
Yeah.
boots and shoes, stationery and cassettes. There is something that sounds, you know, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but vaguely like the Kaddish to me. You know, there's something there's something incantatory about it. I hadn't thought of that
Yeah.
until now. But talking about it now with you, and it does. There's that, you know, and why is he alone? You know, there's no one. He's a man alone in a dark in
Right.
a dark tunnel.
Yeah.
And the other people around him are images, are two-dimensional images. So there's something about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's so when just the evocativeness. I'm also thinking of, you know, Walter Benjamin unpacking my library, the figure of the collector, just that inventorying. Yeah, and here's this.
And also
Yeah.
just the amount of crap we have.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was also, you know, something that's definitely in the book.
Yeah.
Is just the sheer amount of fucking crap.
Yeah, it's insane.
You know.
Yeah.
That's in our lives.
Yeah.
And that the book is, I think, you know, really prescient in talking about. So that's, you know, that just feels like the idea of the list feels like it speaks to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And when you know, when you talked about the your sense of white noise in 1985 being really at the cusp of the internet age, and you know, you can kind of feel the end of the Cold War order coming in a certain way, or at least in terms of sort of general instability. But part of the clutter we live with now is really the externalization of memory. You know, you keep all your digital pictures on your phone. What the hell is on the hard drive or flash drive of my computer? The clutter has just proliferated for us, I think. So just I don't know if this is the right word. I felt there's a kind of austere quality to the listing that, in a certain sense, it's like, here it is. This is the list. This is the inventory. Even though you can hear that there's one particular group, the list. You talked about there being a lot of death in the book. Jack Gladney goes to a motel and has this horribly incompetent attempt to shoot his wife's lover. It all goes wrong. He ends up taking him to the ER instead. I guess, I don't know if that passes for redemption, and of course the hospital's run by these strange order of nuns. It is a DeLillo novel. But there's a way in which you really can, in that list, there was that, you know, the kind of violent act of the shooting, and then followed by his attempt at repair as well. He takes the guy, and then you've got these words kind of popping out that have, now you're in an ER, you know, now there's an attending to the body. So I think there are, you know, almost at a micro level, there are stretches in the list where, you know, that aspect of the. Do you? I mean, that's another way, I guess, at coming at the question of, you know, of the reparative. You mentioned the sort of stunningly Joycean ending, the evocation of the dead at the end. Do you think that if someone comes away from the show and feeling that there is something reparative or a little bit redemptive at the end, is that is that an appropriate
Sure.
response?
I mean, I think anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
if someone finds redemption, that's awesome. far be it from me to deny them that.
Or do you think that is that perhaps there's, I suppose, does that risk, does that risk falling into the sort of conventional desire for narrative closure? Because
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's a story there. Just
Yeah.
because there's not a linear narrative
Yeah.
doesn't mean there's not some kind of story,
Right.
and there's
Right.
not some kind of rhythm. And what I
Yeah.
found when what I find in the novel is that increasingly those lists start to it feels to me like he almost starts to write narrative in the form of lists.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
list someone said, oh, you at a certain point the piece stops being a list and you actually start just giving over to narrative. Well, in fact, no.
No.
Everything except I think two sentences, which end
Yeah.
which end the second and third parts, or the first and second parts
Yeah.
of the book, are formally,
right.
from my own definition anyway, lists. Even the whole motel sequence is we broke it into what we decided were lists.
Yeah.
So it's just that as the novel develops, those things start to take on a kind of narrative, which I find kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. And as you mentioned earlier, in a certain sense, you said, from it doesn't matter if someone's familiar with the book or not, because what's fascinating, I was just describing kind of hearing this botched
Well, I should
shooting.
say it matters.
Yeah.
It's just different. It's a different.
Yes.
It's a different experience if
Yeah.
you know the book than if
Yeah.
you don't know the book.
Yeah.
I don't think knowing the book is required. Is required reading for viewing the piece.
Although you're setting me up as an English professor to say that this is required.
Well, everybody should read the book.
And everyone should see as many of Daniel's shows as possible. Yeah, it is. But in just going back to the question of the ending of the show, I mean, it stops, in a really, quite powerful way. It's like the mix of the video projection, the listing, this remarkable musical score, and then there you go, it's done. I mean, it's not. So were you, in terms of where you ended up, do you feel, or where you ended the show, it was just, it ends when we've hit the last word
Yeah,
in
although
the list?
the end was different in New York than it was.
Oh,
in
it
Germany.
was, yeah.
In
Could you
Germany,
say something
it
about that?
ended with one of the kids doing the Pledge of Allegiance in German, which actually we moved to a slightly earlier place.
Right, yeah.
In the piece here in New York and in Germany, that was the last thing. So
Yeah.
it ended with the kid doing the Pledge of Allegiance in German, followed by a sort of moment of white noise, TV static, and then a blackout, and it felt a little easy.
Yeah.
And this, just by the time we got here, we tried moving it, and it just felt right for just for it to end with the last word.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you, if you have the opportunity, would you, stage White Noise again, do you think?
I'd be very happy to stage
Yeah.
to do this
Yeah.
version of it again.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would happen. I would love if someone would do it again.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, it's just a remarkable show. I just wanted to ask you, and again, this is kind of alongside of Oklahoma, which has just been sort of just made such an important, fantastic impact on Broadway. What was the experience of sort of bringing back white noise, operating in that register while having a show on
I mean,
Broadway.
I thought about it a little bit. Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
I joked like, this is like this evening on Career Enders. I'll do white noise because it's a far more challenging. It's a far more challenging piece, a far less commercial piece than Oklahoma.
Right.
But it was really just. I spoke to Jay about doing it long before Oklahoma was on Broadway, and he wanted to do it, and it took the time that it took, and this was the slot. That said, I thought how lucky I am that I got to do both of these things in the space of several months, and that they could both be happening, and that that they're both different. They're both different, and in some ways very much the same.
Yeah. Do you detect sort of, when you say both different and both the same, could you say a little bit more about that in relation?
Well, I think I have an obsession with violence, an obsession with guns, and that's in Oklahoma, and that's certainly in DeLillo's book. So I think there's something there, and there's a kind of also. I work a lot from the spoken word, and a lot from the sound of something is very important.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I think that's evident in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are parallels. But didn't set out for Oklahoma to be a commercial show on Broadway. We were just sort of making the thing that we wanted to make.
Which is one of the really exciting things about it. So it was a kind of DeLillo-esque coincidence that white noise in Skirball at the same time as. Do you think? I mean, another difference between the US and Germany is, in terms of, or I guess sort of theatre in Britain, the when you were thinking of doing, working with Oklahoma originally, were you? I'm wondering, there's an engagement with a really, it's almost a sort of a canonical text insofar as there's a. Yes, exactly. Well, you've answered my question. So this is exactly. So do you think we need to broaden our thinking about what in the US, our sort of potential theatrical canon is, or
yes.
Yeah.
I think we all need to broaden our thinking. Period. That's a good thing. That's a good thing we should do.
Well said, and I totally agree.
But I think what you're getting at, I mean, for me, it's all just words, right? Whether the words are by DeLillo written in 1985 or the words are by Oscar Hammerstein II written in the 1940s, they're words, and all we have now is this. I don't know why Don put the words in the order that he put them in. I don't want to know. If he wanted to tell me, he would have written that. Instead, he wrote this. So that's what I've got. And I treat Oklahoma the same way. So
I mean, that's a very exciting and important artistic statement. In other words, the possibilities are pretty boundless if we're remaining open in terms of potential play texts. Have you thought about doing anything else with any other DeLillo texts?
I have not, but who knows?
In case Mr. DeLillo is listening, which is possible. So, well, I think this is probably a pretty good place to end, since you've given us a rousing exhortation, Daniel. And I just wanted to thank you. It's an honor and a just great pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming in.